Joe Budden says his co-hosts are too expensive.
I didn't re-up anything.
Okay.
Payroll, I looked at payroll. It's a lot. God forbid if I go out there and find a way to help supplement some of everything that I'm fronting out of pocket.
I think that you're doing what you have to do to make this wonderful ship that you built run.
No. That we built.
If we built it, then
I have to keep the band together. I know Julius Randle was eligible for an extension. I know OG Anunoby want 212. Gotta make the cap work.
Say no more. I'm with you.
Right now, the cap is working. It just takes a little more work for me.
That's right, Sean. A recent episode of the Joe Budden Podcast. It looks like Queens Flip and Joe had an interesting exchange. But this exchange isn't necessarily about Queens Flip, but more so about what Joe was trying to demonstrate to the staff. He was talking about how, he got the prize picks back on board. Remember, it was rumored that Joe lost his prize picks deal, but it turned out that deal was actually probably just put on hiatus. Still, Queens Flip hinted that, maybe people on the show should participate. Maybe people on the show should, get some action for whatever Prize Picks was contributing to the show in terms of an ad buy. But Joe Budden said, well, people are starting to cost more, and I'm trying to put it into the company. And he started making this analogy about the Knicks and how certain players on the Knicks want more money. Was he talking about the rest of the cast? That's right. Is he saying that Queens Flip-ish want more money? Now, I know this is an analogy, but we all know that it's likely that his contract might be up soon. And as I remember, the last time they were arguing about their contract was 2 years ago. And it seems like that magic 2 number is something that runs through the industry. I don't proclaim to know exactly what the contracts are. I'm speculating. But I speculate with the background information of watching the podcast. Also remember that argument that Ish had a couple years ago. Remember the entry-level argument that they had? Very fascinating episode. They don't really talk about their contract, and they haven't talked about their contract since. And I speculate it's because Ish resigned, and after he resigned, that's when Joe brought on Flip and Melissa Ford. It's going to be interesting to see if Ish wants to resign after the show changed from under his ground. I really believe that Joe would not have brought on Flip and Melissa Ford had he not had Ish under the wing for more time under his contract. But Queens Flip also says in this exchange that the show was something Joe Budden built, but then Joe Budden says nah, we all built this. And then Flip responds by saying, well, if we built it, we should participate in the ad revenue. And then Joe kind of rebuttals that with the same thing about like what I just mentioned before. So this was a very fascinating exchange. And as with a lot of these types of things that happen, sometimes it looks fun in the moment. It looks like a hearty har. It looks like a good time is being had. But then when things start to veer off, all of a sudden we can look back at it and say, oh, wait, there was actually undertones that could be gleaned from this. So what I want to do is fast forward into the future and kind of think about what are the undertones that we could look back in this conversation and think that Joe was alluding to when he was having this back and forth. Well, for one, I believe that, like I said, Ish's contract is up. I believe that Flip is ruffling some feathers with the way he questions the business constantly. I think that's why Joe had a issue and had asked Flip not to mention pocket watching on the air. And if you look at this exchange, you can kind of see that Flip he has the handcuffs on him. He can't really go back and forth. And by handcuffs, because I know some people like to misinterpret things to be angry. By handcuffs, I mean he just really can't be free of movement. He really can't say what he wants because what he's doing is technically pocket watching, but Joe has told him stop pocket watching on air. And another thing is Joe's trying new co-hosts. Look at Mark Lamont Hill. I know a lot of people are like, oh, Danny, but those are guests. You don't know if they're going to be on the show. I guarantee you, if one of these guests pop on the show and the fans are like, I love these guys, they changed the podcast, it's so dope, Joe's going to try to keep them for long term. And another thing I found interesting was when Joe said that him and Mark Lamont Hill are working for something on the network, the Joe Budden Network. And that made my ears perk up because I was like, y'all remember when Queen's Flip and Melissa Ford first arrived? They weren't supposed to be on the Joe Budden Podcast. They were not supposed to be the Bionic Six. They were supposed to launch their own shows. They were supposed to have something outside of the JBP, but Joe added them on to his podcast. So now I'm looking at Mark Lamont Hill and I'm saying, maybe if that doesn't work out, Joe might just have him be on the pod part-time, whether it be on Patreon or what not. I mean, he's like a more informed-ish, but he's going to bring a lesser chemistry, so we have to see. And if you look at Mark Lamont Hill's YouTube numbers, they're not that good. Now, it may be by design, but you know what I say, when people have lower numbers, they would always like to boost them up. And what better platform to boost your numbers up than the Joe Budden Podcast, right? That allows you to be visible. It allows you to kind of take advantage of it. And I'm telling you right now, if Mark Lamont Hill gets on the podcast, you're going to see how someone takes advantage of being on a platform to boost their numbers. Joe has a couple people in that studio in Jersey that don't really take advantage of it. You got Ice. He'll collect a bag on caffeine and Twitch, but he won't really put the work in. You got Ish, just shows up to the studio, records, doesn't really do any type of housing content, goes home and really builds houses in real life as opposed to starting an e-course or making content about how to build houses. But Mark Lamont Hill, he gonna change the game. He gonna show Melissa Ford what she should be doing. But I could be wrong. Maybe a person like Mark Lamont Hill, once they get to the show, they'll change up and stop giving it up. That's usually what happens. So we will have to see. All right, but let me know what you think about this exchange I highlighted earlier in the video. There's a lot left to be analyzed, but this exchange was just too much about the business. I mean, Joe's talking about how, he has to account for the cast with this Prize Picks deal coming back, and sounds like the same conversation he was having with Rory and Mal. Like, oh, we got to pay for the expenses. And boy, as a business owner, you got to love it when some of the employees come back to you asking for money and you could just be like, well, the expenses are real high, Johnny. I got to pay for mics. This guy over here wants a raise. This guy over there, he wants to come in less, so I have to pay him a little bit more if he wants to stay longer. So I have to rework the contract. And I'm also noticing maybe Flip, I don't know, it seems like Flip has a lot going on in terms of questioning the pockets, but also, stuff going on outside of the show in terms of challenging bloggers and whatnot. So I wonder at what point might that wear thin and people might be on thin ice. But let me know what you think. Follow me on Instagram, The Stop TV. Follow me on Twitter, The Stop TV. Oh, yes. This is where we're starting to heat up. It's the end of the year coming up. I know people are going to say, Danny, it's August. No, it's really the end of the year. Not too many months left. Before you know it, it'll be Thanksgiving. And then it'll be 2025. And Joe's not going to want this half step in the pod's been doing. He's going to try to boost those numbers up. You're going to see special guests on the Patreon. I think Star's going to be on the Patreon. And if not Star, it's going to be one of those people from the manosphere or from the political sphere that really gets people going, that gets the engagement up. And I'll be here breaking it down. We're going to have a good August, September, November, October, December, heading into January. So get prepared now. Start working hard, because this is when your New Year's resolution should really start happening. All right, y'all. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace.